Houston, Texas, Brown Shipbuilding Company, April 1944. George Bray stands on the dock, 17 years old, staring up at the USS Samuel B. Roberts. She's beautiful. Fresh gray paint, crisp American flag, the smell of welding torches and new metal. Workers swarm over her deck making final adjustments. Officers in pressed khakis stride purposefully across gangplanks. Bray enlisted 3 months ago in Montgomery, Alabama. Walked into the recruiter's office with 15 buddies. They all chose different branches, most went Army. Bray chose Navy. His reasoning was simple, practical. The Navy meant 3 hot meals every day, clean bed linens, a bunk instead of a foxhole, no trudging through mud with a rifle, no trenches. He'd made the smart choice. Looking at the destroyer escort taking shape before him, Bray feels something like pride, maybe excitement. This sleek warship would be his home, his protection, his ticket through the war. It looked like the smartest choice he'd ever made. He had absolutely no idea what he'd just signed up for. The recruiting posters sold a particular vision of destroyer life. Hunters of the fleet, they called them. Fast, modern, exciting. These weren't lumbering battleships, these were racehorses, greyhounds of the sea. You'd see action, you'd make a difference. When the USS Sterett commissioned in Charleston in 1939, she represented everything new and powerful about American naval might. Lieutenant Calhoun transferred from the battleship Tennessee specifically to serve aboard her. He'd spent 2 years on the big ships. Stable platforms with thick armor and massive crews. Safe, certainly, but he wanted something more. He wanted a destroyer. The contrast was stark. Tennessee displaced 32,000 tons. Sterett barely scraped 2,000. Tennessee carried a crew of over 1,000. Sterett had fewer than 250. Tennessee could take punishment. Sterett was built for speed. At the commissioning ceremony, everything gleamed. Fresh paint, polished brass, officers in dress whites. The crew stood at attention as the captain made his speech about duty and honor and the proud tradition of American destroyers. Captain Atherton Macondray and Executive Officer Watson Singer established what the crew would later call a can-do spirit. A winning attitude, the kind of leadership that made men believe they could accomplish anything. The training that followed seemed to confirm it. General quarters drills, fire drills, collision drills, man overboard drills. The crew learned their stations, learned their equipment, the new Mark 37 gun director, the latest radar systems, torpedoes that could sink a battleship with a single well-placed shot. Bob Copeland, a lawyer from Tacoma, gave up his legal practice to command destroyer escorts. This wasn't some draft-dodging desk job. This was purpose, leadership, the chance to command men in combat. The camaraderie seemed real, officers and enlisted men standing together on the bridge wing during the midnight watch. Sharing coffee, watching for enemy submarines, the officer of the deck, the quartermaster, the signalman, the helmsman, each man with an important job, each depending on the others. How about a cup of joe, Mr. Calhoun? That's what destroyer life was supposed to be. Brotherhood forged in salt spray and shared purpose. They called destroyers tin cans. It sounded protective, nautical, like something that kept the good stuff safe inside. But there was another meaning to tin can they'd soon discover. A much darker meaning. The shakedown cruise revealed the first cracks in the recruiting poster fantasy. Lieutenant Dick Hughes reported aboard Sterett with excellent qualifications and high spirits. Within days of putting to sea, he was vomiting into a bucket. Chronic seasickness. The kind that doesn't go away. The kind that makes every watch, every meal, every moment a study in misery. But Hughes never missed his turn on watch. He'd show up pale and sweating, bucket in hand, and stand his 4 hours. The crew respected that, admired it even. They wondered at his logic when he requested transfer to Pensacola for naval aviation training. Trading seasickness for air sickness seemed like a lateral move at best. The North Atlantic in winter revealed what destroyer duty really meant. Cold, bleak, rough. The sea wasn't an enemy you could fight. It was an enemy you endured. Sterett and her sisters ran neutrality patrols, chasing down foreign merchant ships, establishing identities, reporting positions, monotonous work in hostile conditions. The enlisted men lived in constant danger of being washed overboard, not from enemy action, just from the sea itself, because the only way to move between their sleeping quarters aft and their watch stations forward was topside. Exposed to the elements every time, a destroyer in rough seas becomes something alien. The deck pitches at impossible angles. Green water breaks over the bow. Everything not tied down becomes a projectile. Walking on bulkheads becomes normal. Standing on the actual deck becomes the exception. Below, conditions were medieval. 40 to 50 men crammed into single compartments. Bunks stacked 3 high, no ventilation worth mentioning. In the Pacific heat, it became unbearable. Body heat, diesel fumes, the smell of 200 men who couldn't shower properly because fresh water was rationed. You learned to sleep with one leg hooked around the chain, suspending your bunk from the ceiling. Otherwise, the rolling ship would dump you onto the deck. Again, and again, and again, the lucky ones found space on deck, rigged hammocks in precarious positions. Radio man Dick Rhodes stretched his hammock from the bridge wing to a superstructure sponson. He'd swing out over the open ocean every time the ship rolled to starboard. If it rained, water cascading off the pilot house roof would pour down over him. He wouldn't have had it any other way, because the alternative was suffocating in the compartments below. Fresh water became a constant source of tension. The ship's evaporator could produce 10,000 gallons daily. The chief engineer claimed only 8,000. Doc Sharbius fought for the crew's hygiene, for the ability to shower, to wash clothes, to maintain basic human dignity. Eventually, after consulting the Stack's engineering manual, Doc proved the chief wrong. The ship started producing 11,000 gallons daily using boiler water compound. Suddenly, the crew got cleaner, healthier, but it shouldn't have required a fight. The constant motion never stopped. Cork in a wash tub, they called it. The ship rolled, pitched, heaved. Landlubbers from Kansas and Oklahoma felt the ship heel to 35, 40, 45 degrees. Watched it make the long, creaking roll back to port. Feared the ship would capsize. After days of this, they feared it wouldn't capsize, that they'd have to endure it forever. But they still believed, still thought, at least we're not in the trenches, at least we're not in the mud, at least we're safe. Then Guadalcanal happened, August 1942, USS Sterett heading toward the Solomon Islands. The crew's diary entries brim with excitement, confidence. General quarters at 051 Theme this morning and everyone raring to go, only 30 miles from Guadalcanal, and that is close to be taking a carrier group. They watch the carriers launch their planes, everything the flat tops own. The aircraft roar overhead, form up, disappear into the northern sky. The attack is a complete surprise. Air opposition wiped out on the ground. Marines moving ashore with minimal resistance. First blood goes to the Americans. Then the news arrives. Message from the fleet. USS Vincennes, USS Quincy, and HMS Canberra sunk overnight in surface action. USS Astoria, severely damaged, may also be lost. The crew of Sterett is shocked, puzzled. These were cruisers, big ships. Ships that were supposed to be safe. Ships with armor and firepower. Many of the Sterett sailors had friends on those ships, shipmates from training, guys they'd shared liberty with in port. How many survived? The message concludes, Enemy losses not known, but hope they are heavy. It's sobering news. The Japanese Navy remains formidable, dangerous, deadly. For the next weeks, Sterett runs escort duties, plane guard for the carriers. The Marines ashore take nightly pounding from Japanese surface units, battleships bombarding American positions. The Sterett crew wonders, why aren't we sent in to oppose them? Then, November 12, 1942, the call finally comes. Surface engagement, night action, iron bottom sound. Chief Gunner's mate Hodge is having one of his legendary poker games in the galley at 0200. The captain and chief master-at-arms raid the game. Hodge gets busted down to first class, takes it with a shrug. The skipper sure is a wise old coot. It's the last moment of normalcy. Lieutenant Calhoun is in the gun director with his crew. Chapman, the normally quiet and reserved trainer, turns to him. "Mr. Calhoun, if you smell anything bad, don't worry, it'll just be me." Everyone laughs. The icy tension melts. For about 30 seconds, then a searchlight sweeps down the column from flagship to Sterett. Blinding blue-white light. Every ship ahead disclosed to the enemy in one rapid sweep. The order comes. "Commence firing!" And the world explodes. Tracers whistle overhead so close Calhoun feels he could touch them if he raised his hand. The noise is deafening. The concussions shake the director. He recognizes the stutter of Helena's 6-inch guns. "B-B-boom! B-B-boom!" sees them hit repeatedly. The Japanese searchlight extinguishes instantly, but Helena keeps firing. Enemy shells splash on both sides of Sterett. Their own tracers hit squarely on a target's forecastle. Star shells, loaded by mistake instead of armor-piercing, detonate on impact. The burning stars break from their casing, scatter across the enemy deck, illuminate the target perfectly. The ship catches fire near her number 2 turret. Then something strikes the director. Shell fragments flood the small space. The noise is impossible, metal on metal. Shrapnel rattling like gravel thrown at a tin roof. Calhoun waits for the screaming, for someone to collapse, for blood. "Anyone hit?" 3 voices answer, quiet and calm. "Yes, I am." "Yeah, I think so." "Yes, in the back." Byers, seated inches to Calhoun's left, says he's hit in the neck. Calhoun reaches out with his left hand, touches the wound. A puncture, but no arterial spray, not spurting, probably not fatal. "Anyone need immediate treatment?" All 3 answer with loud, definite force. "No!" They stay at their stations. The battle continues. A destroyer appears close on their starboard bow. 2-stacker, crossing from right to left. The commence fire order comes from the bridge. They're at murderously close range. Calhoun thinks he recognizes her as friendly, one of their own 1,730-ton class, but there's no time to argue. The order came from the captain. He must know something. Just as the guns swing on target, Shelton yells, "Sir, that's a friendly ship." Shelton's ship recognition skills are infallible. Calhoun yanks frantically at the ceasefire gong. Shouts into his sound-powered telephone. The director pointer elevates the gun so if they fire, shells will pass harmlessly overhead. They don't fire. The ship is USS Aaron Ward. Friendly. They'd nearly killed their own. Then the real prize appears. Port bow, 2,000 yards, a battleship. She's absorbed everything the American cruisers could deliver. On fire from bridge aft, making barely 5 knots. A perfect target, beautifully illuminated by her own fires, superstructure towering above them. Calhoun instructs Byers to train sights on the pagoda bridge structure. Before the director even completes its swing, the order comes. Open fire. They pour 9 salvos, 36 projectiles into that bridge structure. At this range, every shot hits. Those shells raise hell with any officers or men exposed on the Japanese bridge. They close to less than 1,000 yards. Japanese sailors dive overboard, clothes on fire. Calhoun tells the gun crews what they've accomplished. Through his telephone, he hears their cheers as the news relays to them. Commander McWhorter fires a full salvo of 4 torpedoes. Calhoun sees 2 red explosions in the water minutes later. Direct hits. The Johnston, steaming nearby, charges directly at Japanese cruisers. Captain Evans orders attack speed. The little destroyer zigzags through enemy shell splashes, closing the range, firing constantly. Paint blisters and burns on Gun 55's barrel from the rate of fire. After each shot, pressurized air clears the barrel of hot gases, but it's dangerous. A round sitting too long in the breech will cook, and when it cooks, it explodes. Clint Carter gets a scare when a sudden course change forces his loaded gun to strike the safety stops. The round sits in the breech, cooking, waiting. Carter raises Lieutenant Hagen, asks permission to fire manually before detonation. Before Hagen can answer, the ship turns again. The gun swings off its stops and fires automatically, ridding the breech of its time bomb. Bobby Chastain in Gun 54 watches a Japanese shell explode directly below another destroyer. The ship lurches upward from the concussion, watches another burst to starboard, close enough to see the red-orange flash at the explosion's heart. A bomber ahead, he doesn't know which one, takes a direct hit to the wing root. The wing folds upward. The bomber rolls inverted, falls, spins, breaks apart. 3 parachutes. The plane carries 10 men. Then the hits start coming to Sterett. Red Hammock takes shrapnel in the seat of his pants. Reports to the wardroom as ordered. He's the first wounded to arrive. Doc Nice asks, "Where are you hit, Red?" "In the seat of the pants, Doc." "Drop your pants." As Hammock loosens his belt, someone, probably Tiny Hannah, comes through the wardroom door carrying Torpedo Man Hawkins in his arms. Hawkins's leg hangs from his knee by a shred of flesh. Blood pours from the wound. The moment Hammock sees Hawkins, he pulls up his dungarees. Decides he has better things to do, like help fight fires. Doc Nice reads him instantly. "Hold it, Red. I need you here more than they do back aft. They have plenty of people for fires, and I'm real short-handed here." Hammock is one of 15 crew members who received advanced first aid training. He stays. The wounded pour in, some on stretchers, some carried in arms. Doc Nice stands calmly, pointing occasionally. "Take him out. These are the ones who've died, or are too far gone to save." The sick bay is within 10 feet of the number 4 handling room where the worst damage occurred. A putrid odor fills the space. Fire, burned flesh, blood, death. The heat is unbearable. Doc strips down to his shorts. Tom. McWhorter does the same. Hawkins is laid on the operating table. His right leg must be amputated. A metal fragment has pierced his left eye through the cornea. Deep wound at his left cheekbone. Numerous other wounds across his body. Doc sticks a hypodermic needle into Hawkins's wrist, hands it to McWhorter. "If he starts to pull out of it before we finish, give him another cc, Mac." Sodium pentothal enters Hawkins's bloodstream. He passes out quickly. They work. Next comes Shreves, shattered leg. Still in good humor somehow. "You're not going to have to cut it off, are you, Doc?" "I don't know, old man. I'll do all I can to save it. But it's just small talk." Doc knows it's hopeless. The leg comes off. Red Spaulding lies on another table, dying. In his final moments, this courteous, respectful sailor keeps calling McWhorter Mac with naturalness, as if they'd been close friends for years instead of shipmates standing on ceremony. Doc pats Spaulding's arm. "You were a great boy, Red. Those are the sentiments of everyone in the room." Meanwhile, McWhorter moves between patients in the other spaces, uses warm water to clean wounds, spreads sulfathiazole paste, wraps bandages, not a whimper from the wounded. A radio man named Johnson helps. They work methodically, calmly, as if this is normal. as if treating torn bodies in unbearable heat with limited supplies is just another day. Soloway meets McWhorter in the passageway. Jackson's dead, Smitty, VRE Martin, almost the entire crew of the afterguns. This is the first indication of the casualty extent. 32 men total, 28 killed, 4 missing. Late afternoon. The bodies are ready. 28 sailors laid out on the main deck aft in one long row, each sewn into a canvas bag, each weighted at the foot with a 5-inch projectile. Perry Hall and his team handled the preparation, straightening limbs fixed in distorted positions by rigor mortis, sewing the heavy canvas, adding the weights. It was not pleasant work. Now all hands form on the fantail, everyone except those on watch. A squad of bluejackets stands at attention, rifles at order arms. Lieutenant Calhoun watches the preparations and thinks this will be mechanical. An unpleasant job that must be done. The scene offers no comfort. The bodies have been lifeless for more than 12 hours. Unembalmed, they generate the unmistakable stench of death. Blood soaks through the canvas shrouds, collects in little puddles on the gray steel deck. Behind them, damaged 5-inch guns with blackened shell holes and twisted metal shields. On either side, unshaven, worn, sad faces of men who fought desperately for their lives and lost good comrades. It is not a pretty picture, but Calhoun suspects that in their private reflections each man has come to accept that their lost shipmates are no longer in those canvas bundles. The bodies are just shells, symbols. The men themselves are somewhere else. With bowed heads, they wait for Captain Coward to speak. The enormity of destroyer warfare settles over them like a physical weight. This is what they signed up for. This is what tin can really means. The battle ends. Sterett survives. But the war continues. They return to escort duties. The glamorous assignments go to the new Fletcher-class destroyers arriving from American shipyards. Bigger, better armed, more heavily equipped. Sterett and her pre-war sisters get relegated to less exciting roles. Escort duty between the Solomons, Espiritu Santo, and Noumea. Routine, monotonous. Morale erodes. The daily grind becomes worse than combat. At least combat has a purpose, a focus, the adrenaline of survival. Escort duty is just endurance. The cramped quarters that seem tolerable during the excitement of deployment become unbearable. 40 to 50 men per compartment. 3 high bunks, heat, no air conditioning, body odor, sweat, diesel fumes layered so thick you can taste them. Sleeping requires hooking your leg around the chain suspending your bunk. The alternative is falling to the deck repeatedly as the ship rolls. Fresh water remains scarce despite Doc Sharbius's victory. Limited showers, laundry piling up, everyone starts to smell the same. That particular destroyer stinks sweat, fuel, metal, salt. The isolation becomes crushing, months at sea. Same faces every day, same conversations, same watches, same stations. No privacy anywhere on a ship this small. 4 hours on watch, 8 hours off, never enough sleep. The cycle breaks you down. Coffee and conversation become the only respite. Mail call is the only connection to home. Men memorize letters from wives, girlfriends, mothers. Read them until the paper falls apart. Some guys get Dear John letters. Break down quietly in their bunks. Movies play on repeat until everyone can recite the dialogue. The same films, over and over. You watch anyway because it's something different. Some escape from the monotony. Weather remains a constant enemy. Winter North Atlantic, frozen spray coating the deck in ice. Pacific typhoons becoming regular occurrences. The rolling never stops. The pitching never eases. Seasickness never fully goes away for some men. They just learn to function through it. Between battles, fear takes a different form. Submarines everywhere. Air raids without warning. Mines drifting in shipping lanes. Every shadow could be an enemy periscope. Every sound might be a torpedo. Depth charges shake the ship when destroyers hunt submarines. Near misses become routine. You learn to distinguish between distant explosions and close calls, between something happening to another ship and something happening to you. Doc Sharbius would later write about this period with dark humor. I remember destroyer duty, but this was submarine stuff. We always seemed to be more under than above the surface of the angry seas. I felt ashamed to take Uncle Sam's money, not that I ever refused any actual offering from the paymaster, because the Sterett had the healthiest damn crew in the entire Navy. It was a backhanded compliment. The crew wasn't healthy. They were just enduring, suffering without complaint, too proud or too stubborn to report injuries that didn't prevent them from standing watch. The monotony punctuated by terror. The terror punctuated by monotony. This was destroyer life, but they hadn't seen anything yet. October 1944, USS Samuel B. Roberts en route to Samar Station. The forecast mentions possible weather. The crew doesn't think much of it. They've handled storms before. Then the typhoon hits. For 3 full days, hell visits the little destroyer escort. The ship rolls 59 degrees on the inclinometer. 59 degrees. At terrifying intervals, it becomes easier to walk on bulkheads than stand on the deck. George Bray and the gun crew's topside watch waves tower above the ship. Green water breaks over the bow. The ship seems to disappear into the ocean, then claw its way back to the surface. Below, men fall from their bunks repeatedly. After a few hard landings on the deck, they learn. Sleep with a leg hooked around the chain. Or don't sleep at all. Most of the crew who haven't been to sea before lie in their bunks, paralyzed by nausea. But the pitching hull permits that luxury only to the resourceful, the lucky. Everyone else suffers through it. In the mess, men press slices of wet bread under their supper trays to keep meals on the table. When nausea permits them to stomach a meal, which isn't often, some retch so badly they think they might die. Landlubbing enlistees from plain states feel the ship heel to starboard, 35, 40, 45 degrees, then make the long creaking roll back to port. Fear the ship will sink. Fear the ship will capsize. Fear they'll die down here in these metal compartments, drowned like rats in a trap. After suffering through days of cork in a washtub gyrations, it becomes just as natural to worry that the ship might remain afloat. That this will never end. That the rest of their lives will be this endless pitching and rolling and vomiting. Everything loose becomes a projectile. Men get thrown across compartments, bruises on bruises. You wedge yourself into corners. Brace against bulkheads. Try to find any position that won't result in injury when the next big wave hits. Topside is worse. Lifelines become essential. Men clip themselves on when they must move. Green water over the bow can sweep you overboard in an instant. One moment you're there, next moment you're gone, lost in the darkness. No one will find you. When the 3-day ordeal finally ends, George Bray stands on watch. His bones ache. His stomach still churns, but he's alive. They all are. The feeling that the poor troops ashore are getting a raw deal has completely disappeared. Bray sees flashes on the southern horizon, assumes it's another storm. Calls up to the bridge wing. "Hey, Captain, look at that storm." Bob Copeland looks, pauses. "That's not a storm, son. It's a battle. We've got it on the radio in here." A battle. October 25, 1944. Dawn. Radar operator Edward Wheaton reports contacts. Bearing 330, 30 to 40 miles. The returns are fuzzy. Could be rain squalls, could be land masses. Captain Copeland thinks there's a storm on the horizon. Tells Wheaton to keep an eye on it anyway. A lookout calls to Officer of Deck Dudley Moylan. Object on the horizon. Looks like the mast of a ship. Executive Officer Bob Roberts comes on the ship's loudspeaker. If you're interested, come up on deck. Remnants of the Japanese fleet are fleeing over the horizon. George Bray, below decks turning in his laundry, runs topside, expecting to see distant ships running away. Something exciting but safe. Instead, he sees a white phosphorescent fireball illuminate the pre-dawn morning. Smoky fingers falling in shallow arcs into the sea. Someone is taking a range on them. General quarters sounds. Bray grabs his steel helmet, runs to his battle station. Gunnery Officer Bill Burton confirms what the radar is showing. Battleships, heavy cruisers, Imperial Japanese Navy, the big ones. Copeland gets on the TBS radio, raises Admiral Sprague on the Fanshawe Bay. The Admiral already knows. His pilots are overhead getting buffeted by anti-aircraft fire from the Japanese fleet. The horizon fills with pagoda masts. On the USS Johnston, Captain Ernest Evans makes his decision immediately. His entire career has prepared him for this moment. He orders attack speed. The little destroyer charges directly toward the Japanese battleships. His speech to the crew becomes legend. This will be a fight against overwhelming odds from which survival cannot be expected. We will do what damage we can, but they charge anyway. The math is absurd. USS Johnston displaces 2,200 tons. The battleship Yamato displaces 72,000 tons. Johnston's 5-inch guns against Yamato's 18-inch rifles. A destroyer escort like the Samuel B. Roberts weighs 250 tons, barely more than one of Yamato's main turrets. This isn't a fight, it's a mismatch of cosmic proportions. But the Americans charge. Johnston zigzags between enemy shell splashes. Chasing splashes, they call it, relying on Japanese gunners to correct their aim. Because they continuously adjust range and train, salvos rarely strike the same place twice. If the Japanese figured out the tactic, they could fire to the same coordinates repeatedly. End the game. They don't figure it out. Paint blisters on Johnston's gun barrels from the rate of fire. Clint Carter's gun 55 fires so fast and so continuously that a shell nearly cooks off in the breech when a course change strikes the safety stops. For agonizing seconds, the round sits in the breech, temperature rising. Carter expects the detonation any moment. The gun mount would disintegrate. Everyone inside would die instantly. Then the ship turns. The gun swings off the stops, fires. The shell launches safely. Carter breathes again. Bobby Chastain watches from gun 54 as shells bracket nearby ships. Geysers of water tower higher than the carrier's flight decks. One Halifax-sized shell explodes close enough that Chastain can see the individual shrapnel pieces spinning through the air. Samuel B. Roberts lays smokescreen, returns fire with her 2 5-inch guns. It's like throwing rocks at a bear. But they throw rocks anyway. The battle lasts 2.5 hours, an eternity. Every second expecting the hit that will end everything. Then it comes. Johnston takes catastrophic damage. Engine room flooded, steering gone, power failing. But she keeps fighting, keeps firing, even as she's dying. Captain Evans gives the order, abandon ship. Samuel B. Roberts suffers similar fate. Multiple hits, fires out of control. Captain Copeland makes the call, abandon ship. George Bray hits the water covered in fuel oil. The oil is everywhere, thick, black, sticky. He tries to splash it away from him, gathering up foamy piles and pushing them aside. But the stuff has a mind of its own. It floats back, sticks to everything, his face, his hands, his clothes. Here and there, the slick is burning in the lazy manner oil burns. Not intense flames, just persistent. Spreading slowly, Bud Comet paddles a raft toward Bray's group, ties up to form a small flotilla. About 60 men gather on and around a life raft whose wooden lattice bottom has been mostly shot out. 7 feet long, 4 feet wide. More like an oversized donut float than a proper boat. A floater net, 20 by 20 feet of mesh netting made buoyant by hard rubber discs, is tied to the raft. Jack Moore, Lieutenant West, and Chief Wallace are its ranking members. The wait begins. Sharks appear almost immediately. Bray sees them circling below, 10, 12 feet long, not small, moving in slow, lazy circles. Smaller fish hover in stationary schools, possibly barracuda. In past months, Bray occasionally saw sharks following the Roberts near dusk, gorging themselves when garbage went overboard. The sharks off Samar have richer fare now, much richer. Eventually, George Bray stops worrying too much about what's beneath him. By the time the sun dips toward the western horizon, fear of the big predators yields to wary acceptance. Mostly he stops looking down. Mostly he starts worrying about what might or might not be coming from over the horizon. Night falls. The true horror begins. Howard Kao swims to the group. He's one of the few survivors from a scaffolding where many men gathered. He relates the horrible story of what happened there. The sharks attacked systematically, methodically. One moment a man was there quietly treading water. The next moment screaming. Seconds later gone. Quiet. Then screaming. Then gone. Just like that. The fear that was already present intensifies. Men kick and splash at phantoms, at shadows, at anything moving in the water. On another raft, Johnston survivors face the same nightmare. Ellsworth Welch feels something grab the back of his life belt. Rips it clean off, tears his pants and shorts. He later writes, "This was a situation for which I wasn't prepared. My contract with the Navy was to fight the enemy, not sharks." Robert Billy, wounded during the first Japanese salvo, drifts in and out of consciousness. Someone ties him to an unwounded shipmate who keeps his face above water. Before the night ends, that shipmate, unhurt, strong, with his whole life ahead of him, gets grabbed by a shark and pulled under. Gone. A Japanese destroyer appears. Pagoda-shaped mast silhouette against the backlighting moon, searching for survivors from Japanese cruisers sunk in the battle. Everyone goes silent. Men who were kicking at sharks now float motionless, don't want to break the surface with a splash that might reveal their presence. Men who were singing stop abruptly. The searchlight sweeps the seas near them. Soft prayers break the silence. The destroyer passes, doesn't see them or doesn't care. Neil Deathlifts drifts alone on his second day. Separated from his group somehow, stung by jellyfish severely enough to scramble his mind. He hallucinates, fades out of awareness, then back into it. A Navy peacoat appears drifting on the swells. He collects it, holds it, puts it on when darkness falls. Enjoys its heavy, wet embrace. Later he wakes to find the peacoat gone. He's standing on the bridge of a ship. The abandoned ship order has been given. His perception's clear. He realizes he's pulling off his dungarees as if preparing to jump from a deck into water. But he's already in the water. He pulls the dungarees back on. His life belt is losing buoyancy. He removes the dungarees again, ties the legs to use them for flotation. But a long rip in the seat prevents them from holding air. He swims for an island, thinks he hears the distant sound of a diesel engine. Next, he's aware of dizzying vertigo standing on his head, spinning in the water. He rights himself. Feels something sharp and rough under his feet. Coral. Then it's gone as another breaker twists him around toward the beach. He gasps for air. Water washes into his mouth. Another wave shoves him sideways and upside down. He grabs for purchase on the sharp coral. Then blackness. He wakes to voices shouting. He's sitting waist-deep in water, naked, disoriented. "I thought the whole Japanese Navy was coming down on me," he'll later recall. "I was sitting on a coral reef and I could see a crowd of Filipinos on the beach yelling at me. One Filipino runs across the coral, picks Deathlifts up, heads back to shore. Deathlifts protests, 'Put me down, I can walk.' The man obliges. Deathleft slumps to the ground immediately. His behind has been chopped up like hamburger from sitting on coral. Large saltwater sores cover his groin. He cannot walk. They carry him. The day becomes a blur. Motion, voices, people taking him somewhere. Inside a cabin in the jungle, hands rub soft substance on his sores. Cocoa butter. He wakes once to drops of water falling on his face. Looking up, he sees the wide brown face of a Filipino woman. She's crying. Her tears fall onto his face. "Hello, Mama," he says. Second morning, October 27th. George Bray's group smells land after midnight. The rich scent of Samar jungle, sweet effluvium carried on shifting winds. The sound of breakers hissing on an unseen beach, maybe a mile away. But Samar is Japanese-held. The Bloody Island, site of the Balangiga massacre, the Pelagian insurgency. Known for violence even before this war, they debate, swim for shore or wait for rescue. In the pitch darkness, Jack Moore spots a patrol boat. Its searchlight plays over dark waters nearby. They stay hidden, stay quiet. Dawn approaches, then diesel engines, real ones this time, not hallucinations. An LCI landing craft infantry arrives, begins pulling survivors from the water. But there's a capacity problem, too many survivors, not enough space. 40 men squeeze into a compartment designed for 20. Like the black hole of Calcutta, Copeland later writes. Everyone is stark naked, utterly exhausted. Resembled reptiles far more than human beings. The crew of the Gambier Bay strips to minimum to accommodate the bedraggled newcomers from Samuel B. Roberts. Copeland receives worn khaki trousers and an old dungaree jumper without buttons. Too weak to get up properly, he rolls from his bunk and falls hard to the deck. Lands on knees and elbows, too exhausted to rise. Crawls over his men, gets cussed as he presses elbows into stomachs and faces. He's searching for water, desperately thirsty. Finds a grating to the engine room with warm air wafting out. Beside it, a white porcelain bowl from the crew's mess, filled with fresh water. He gulps it down, lies there, crawls back to his bunk. Twice more during the night he struggles topside. Each time finds the same white bowl filled with clean water, guzzles it eagerly. After his third long drink around 4 a.m., he hears one of the LCI's crew enter the compartment. My God, that dog has drank a lot of water tonight. The indignity of survival. Not everyone gets rescued. Final casualty counts tell the story. USS Samuel B. Roberts, 89 killed, 120 survived. USS Johnston, 186 killed, 141 survived. Destroyer life's true cost revealed in simple mathematics. Lieutenant Calhoun reflects years later on that night in November 1942. In our wildest fantasies in the spring of 1939, none of us imagined what would come. From the recruiting station to slugging it out at murderously close range against a Japanese cruiser, with a battleship and destroyer to follow. Doc Sharbius writes in a letter almost 18 years later. My orders seemed to read destroyer duty, but this was submarine stuff, as we always seemed to be more under than above the surface of the angry seas. I felt ashamed to take Uncle Sam's money. Not that I ever refused any actual offering from the paymaster, because I think the Sterett had the healthiest damn crew in the entire Navy. I couldn't even make headlines like some of the pharmacists' mates on other ships who were taking out appendixes with Bowie knives and bent spoons. The Sterett continues fighting, continues serving. More battles, more escorts, more storms, more dead shipmates. When the war finally ends, USS Sterett decommissions on November 2nd, 1945. A former officer now commanding a Navy tug in New York Harbor receives orders to tow Sterett to her assigned nest of reserve ships at Jones Point up the Hudson River. The tow takes several hours. He wanders the ship with a flashlight. tours the spaces, old memories flash back. Old voices, the smooth running turbines, the quiet machinery. It was all quite melancholy, he writes. That was the last time I saw the Sterett. J.D. Jeffrey reads through Sterett's logs years later, 8 days reviewing every entry. The final log entry, November 2nd, 1945, seems disappointingly sterile at first. Moored starboard side, mustered crew at quarters, no absentees, transferred listed officers and men. Decommissioning board number 2 came aboard, commission pennant and colors hauled down. Sterett decommissioned. On reflection, Jeffrey realizes, maybe the simple entries are most appropriate. The record speaks for itself, he adds. The Sterett handled everything the Japs could throw at her. I choose to think that having proved herself a proud first-line warship, she was spared the indignity of old age and a second-class existence in an alien peacetime navy. Return to that dock in Houston. April 1944, George Bray looking up at the USS Samuel B. Roberts. He thought the Navy meant safety. 3 meals a day, clean sheets, no trenches, no foxholes, no mud. He was wrong about the safety part. Across the Navy, similar scenes played out. Young faces at commissioning ceremonies, fresh paint, polished brass, officers making speeches about duty and honor, crews standing at attention, believing in their ships. Contrast that with burial at sea. 28 canvas bags weighted with shells, blood pooling on gray steel decks. Contrast it with survivors floating in oil slicks. Watching sharks circle, watching friends disappear beneath the surface with barely a ripple. The real meaning of tin can wasn't protective, wasn't romantic, wasn't nautical charm, it was literal. Thin metal between you and everything trying to kill you, the ocean, the weather, the enemy, the sharks. Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, wrote that USS Sterett was a gallant fighting ship superbly handled by her officers and men. True words, but the cost. Destroyer casualty rates were among the highest in the Navy, higher than submarines in some campaigns, higher than the big ships everyone assumed were more dangerous. The sailors who served on tin cans believed destroyers meant safety. They learned destroyers meant survival. If you were very, very lucky, empty bunks, folded flags, silent guns. That's what destroyer life became. That's what George Bray discovered when he chose the Navy over the trenches. He survived the war, came home, lived a long life, but he never forgot those 2 days in the water off Samar. Never forgot the taste of fuel oil, the sight of fins circling, the screams that ended in silence. He made the smart choice, he'd thought. Standing on that dock in Houston, the Navy, 3 meals and clean sheets. He had no idea what he'd signed up for. None of them did.